Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible, and from a vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor Theta, our local designer Norman Rafferty, and our good friend and GM, Lessons Learned. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rules at the table. Pronouns are he, him, they, them. Lessons, why don't you go?
I'm a daylight streamer, variety streamer here on Twitch under the Lessons Learned One. Also on YouTube on Lessons Learned. I'm doing a soft relaunch of the channel pretty soon. And I'm also a writer over at Amazon with Nights and Stars, a collection of short stories of fantasy, horror, and science fiction.
There we go. And Rafferty.
I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him. I work for Sanguine Games, where we make tabletop games like Iron Claw, Urban Jungle, and Eumorphica that's coming up. And it's weird. People keep telling me the Prince of Persia, the first one, the 8-bit era one, is a difficult game. And it's like, I beat that on the first try. I'm not even good at video games. You guys have weird definitions. It's a game.
Rafferty, the ultimate gamer.
Well, it gives you infinite lives. I remember they put that on the box like it was a surprise feature. This game has infinite lives because back then that was like weird. And it was like, it's gonna be, how is this game hard? All
right. So for today's topic, we're all a forgetful bunch at the table. We forget simple bonuses towards actions, forget character names, and even fail to mention that we fully intended to carefully wrap up the cursed artifact before we traveled. To fix these kind of things, we make corrections, and we'll usually retcon and re-explain a scenario. But how to handle these retcons over longer, more complex scenes can get a bit tricky. Today, we'll be talking about all the ways you can tell your players how it really happened. So, to start it off, lessons. Do you got a good example of maybe a time where you had to backtrack further than you've ever imagined that you had to?
Yeah, when I got introduced to Roll20, basically. And why do I say that? I say that because, of course, Roll20, has the list of all the choices you made. And then you look over, it's like, oh, wait a minute. This monster either should have survived, 3 or 4 more rounds because I didn't make the right call. I forgot an immunity or something like that. And then I was like, and here's the conundrum. Do you go to your players, go like, by the way, let's extend the damage, extend the situation because I made a mistake, or do you just let them kill the monster because you made a mistake and you got to swallow it? And I've done it both ways, and it always feels bad for me to do the retcon, right? I know there's a workaround, which is, give your monster more hit points, but that also kind of feels like a cheat because it's like, it's not player's fault that I made the mistake, right? That I didn't realize that I actually put in immunity to or resistance to something like swords or whatever, and I should have used it, but I didn't. So I think most of the time retcons to me feel like there's 2 types of retcons, a pro player and anti-player. And as a GM and most of the being felt like most of them are anti-player, but it also comes to all this are pro player, right?
Right, and I guess that's a fair bit of context. Every time you have to go back and change a decision, you're choosing whether or not this is going to be easier or harder on everyone because the context is now completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Rafferty, what about you? What kind of fun, wacky hijinks have you had with time?
Okay, so I have a confession because I'm glad Lessons brought this up. I was so worried when we started streaming way back in 2015 on the live on 40 Up for live stream that because there would be a record and because things were being recorded on video and there was a text log, that players would catch me when I was cheating. And I know it came as a shock to some of the players. I'm a little surprised about this, and I'm worried they're going to look over the logs a little more carefully when some of them have been surprised, like, wait, Rafferty cheats? I didn't know he was cheating. And it's like, I'm going to stand up and say that the hallmark of a good, what separates the good game master from the great game master is you don't know when the great game master is cheating. It's like stagecraft. They always talk about us being actors or storytellers. No, we're magicians. We're supposed to impress you, like how I'm doing something that's impossible, but you don't know how I'm doing it. If you knew how
But
I was doing it, you wouldn't be having as much fun.
But then we have the retcons where you have to go ahead and pull back the curtain and go, okay, everyone, okay, the trick didn't go off perfectly.
Yeah, I've got several decades of experience here, and I'm trying to think back when I've really used a retcon. I know there's been a couple times where we found out that somebody isn't actually dead. Like Lesson said pro and anti-player retcons. And then someone will say, wait, I'm not actually dead. I have this special ability that I forgot to invoke. And I know I've had some people who are most of the OSR people that I've met, or the people who wanted to play earlier editions of D&D, was because since the new games supposedly give you more free will and give you more choices, and you have all those dependencies, that people have more special abilities they tend to forget that they have. And so I say supposedly because no, I played Rollmaster. You're full of shit. Or wizards in D&D who had, people who had 12 different magic items. So I don't know. This isn't really a thing that comes up with me a lot because I usually make the stories go more forward. It's interesting. Lessons brought up the idea of the monster dying too quickly. I can only imagine how embarrassing it would be to turn to a bunch of players and say, no, wait, you didn't actually win. We have to do that over. I have made mistakes like that before, but under the theory of good improv, this also begs the question of what is supposed to happen? I mean, that's the question.
I guess the baseline of what is supposed to happen is every single rule is seen, obeyed, and followed in sequence exactly as it should have been presented, were everything automatic.
Okay.
But of course, we're all completely fallible beings, and it's not always true either.
Well, that's the procedure. But I'm talking about, and I agree with you there, I'm talking about the outcome. Like when we say, I saw people, so there was a Twitter thread for a while where people were talking about, well, this was a fight the players were supposed to win. Like when the two goblins TPK the entire party. And, and they were
it's something where you didn't anticipate it would be challenging.
Yeah, there's the difference. I think you have to carve out a difference because the difference there is, we talked about that before about the script, right? If the players are supposed to win, that's what the script says, and that's one expectation. If there's expectation that it would be easier for them to overcome the challenge, but there's still margin for error or margin for failure, that's a bit different.
Right. Well, I've been playing a bunch of adventures where they were scripted. Like one of the things I was complaining about Starfinder is I was on a published Starfinder adventure where all of these encounters were scripted to end a very specific way. So if we won, like we get in a space combat encounter and we actually won it, we weren't supposed to win it. So no one knew what to do because all of the rest of the adventure was scripted so we would win, so that we lost, except we won.
Yeah.
Or there'd be encounters where you're supposed to meet, get into a fight and win this fight to get on the next one. But, any fight you get in, you could roll all ones. I know the odds are low, but you could conceivably lose one or more player characters in any fight. Because if you can't lose, that also gets to the thing of why are we dicing this out if we can't lose? So I've been in situations where the GM ignored what, I guess it's kind of like a retcon, where the GM is ignoring what's happening or the way our die rolls are coming out because we're supposed to go, which is kind of a retcon. But I kind of feel bad because I don't do that. It's like if you mention something happen, if you have to cheat where the players can so obviously see it, that's bad. And if you have to cheat, that's so obviously bad to make the story happen the way it's supposed to. You have broken kayfabe. You have told your players, this is not an emergent story about you. This is a story that's supposed to go to a specific end. And as I've complained multiple times, that's the Mercer effect right there. Mercer's players don't complain about that. They expect that.
Yeah.
I think this is why I end up like being fairly anti-retcon when I end up run things. Not that I'm against rewriting things, but I typically will go, well, we did this thing wrong. Why don't we just keep going and just remember that in the future? It's like, okay, you took 5 more hit points of damage. We're not going to give that back. We're just going to keep going, and we will make sure not to ruin that for you again.
I mean, I'll confess, I've been in groups that keep saying after we did something, oh, we wound up doing that wrong, and that's why I'm actually in favor of more rules light games, because I'm getting sick and tired of people tripping over rules and stuff that they don't know is there.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I said, even if it were incredibly simple, you could still just forget.
In a moment, yeah.
You can. It's but I think we're pretty much on the page of you probably have to roll with it rather than retcon. I'm guessing there's other groups out there that had their entire party TPK'd, and so their GM had to come up with some way around it.
I also have that story too. One of the first experiences I had back when I was starting to run tabletop sessions was I had a group of like 10 people. This is already a recipe for disaster, but hold on. Somewhere around like level 4 to 5, I go, okay, I'm gonna have them go through this mountain tunnel, and there's gonna be like a whole bunch of things that are at level. I'm gonna put an aboleth here that's in these watery tunnels. I'm gonna put some bullshit mimics which do things that you're not expecting. It was generally early novice, I'm being mean kind of GMing, but also because I figured that they could all handle it. Killed every single one of them to a man. That went about as expected, looking back at it. And of course, the immediate thing I went is, okay, we all still want to be here next week. I'm going to have one random god pop up, rewind time specifically for you, and they're going to hang that over your heads now. Let's just keep moving and just choose to not go down the danger corridor.
See, that is what
Which
critique
me.
It's a seemingly pro player retcon, but in fact, I think it's an anti-player retcon. Because I think for me, I would feel insulted that, after all, why don't the gods do like in the actual, ancient Greek stories and help me all the time? Why don't the gods just show up before I enter the cave and give me a helmet of invisibility, right? The gods can do that, then they would do it.
Jerks.
Yeah, it's like, why did I do that, right? If they could save me from that once I'm dead, why did they wait? It's like, God is...
And looking back at it, it's like, did that maybe drain some of the heroic moments where, say, the party Hexblade managed to make it to the end and heroically decided to fight off the last aboleth, and then, maybe still didn't make it? It's like, did I drain his fun because I said, well, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way?
Yeah.
The question...
But a lot of that was also reading the room at the time and seeing how everyone felt about things.
See, that's it right there. Lessons and I would be annoyed. but on the other hand, we weren't your players. Like this is why I'm always questioning, well, what should we be doing? And this also gets into like the design intent. It's like I'm always like the big thing I complain about in Notes of the Aleph all the time is intention versus expression, and also where you have a legacy set of rules, because like Dungeons and Dragons has this huge problem of where everybody wants it to be Critical Role, but the game wants to fucking kill you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got this problem of, it used to be a game about endurance and luck and roguelike permadeath, and those rules are still baked into the game. They haven't excised those yet, and mostly because people keep yelling that they want them back in. But on the other hand, you also have this impulse to do storytelling. And so you've got this huge problem where these are constantly at war with each other, and no one's admitting it or solving it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's, I think, another type of retcon, which is sort of the hidden retcon, future retcon. Like, again, just because you don't have a script, but GM may have a plan, right? A plan of general where what the players are generally going to confront next. But if they do something that either obviates that completely, because they might decide, I'm not going to go to the left, I'm going to go to the right, then you do have to change your plans. Not really a retcon because it's not,
Mhm.
A retroactive.
You still came to the table with an expectation, just like everyone else at the table.
And that's, I think, and for that, so it's the idea of, again, rules as tool set is like, well, the situation is changed, so I have to pull different tools and deal with the situation, right? As opposed to keep hammering, plot hammering the things like, well, no, you got to go where I tell you to go because that's the only thing I thought about.
The lure of treasure compels you to continue this.
Well, I mean, like, I can understand if the reason why I keep bringing up Mercer Effect is you could have a game that's sculpted that way. Because I think, like, at least with the rise of Vampire the Masquerade and the rise of experiential to being games, we a long time ago talked about being versus doing. Some people are here because they want to be a fantasy character and have that fantasy validated by other people. So they're not necessarily obsessed with the way the story is going, whether it's going their way or the way they want it to, or how the die rolls are coming out. Their primary enjoyment of the game is I'm here and other people are experiencing me and validating me. So those people aren't going to like give you a lot of grief about the way the story is going or being rewound.
But they probably would give you grief if you missed the +1 bonus to kill their character.
Well, or there's even people who want their characters to suffer and die. I mean,
oh, that's me. Hi.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that's a valid thing. I'm glad. I'm like to toot my own horn. We just released Abyss, and I spent a lot of time. There's an essay that I wrote for the original Iron Claw, and I went through and rewrote it and updated it for Abyss, discussing what different players might expect out of your game. And there are some players who will play to lose. That it's fun to watch your character maybe succeed, but also if they have to go down, go down.
Or at least enjoy the struggle of it.
Right. Yeah. It's I'm guessing from what people have brought up in the terminology that there's a lot of groups that use the retcon a lot more, especially because video games use it with impunity. I mean, what's a reload from your last save but a fucking retcon? So
right. Though at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen a group that says, all right, you guys failed this fight, let's start back exactly where the fight started. Because I know there are games with abilities specifically to allow you to do those, and everybody hates them because they have to remember how everything was.
Well, I have been on the receiving end of that, basically. And this was a situation happening in 3rd edition. And I don't know if some people say that never happened to me. But in mid to high level playing 3rd edition, one of the things, at least our group found out, was that whoever won initiative won the combat. Because essentially you can just, depending on the situation, you just alpha strike whatever came out to you with all your abilities and magical stuff, and you just win. And even if you win in the first round, you could put enough penalties on the other side that they would be in a severe disadvantage, right? So what happened was that literally this GM created a anti-party, right? We know those, a party that's designed to challenge you. But we won.
I'm tired of you all winning.
We won the initiative and we won in a single round, right? I cast multiple fireballs because it's 3rd edition, it had magic fit and whatever. So we did that, we went in, and he's like, no, we got to do this again, And the second fight went a little longer, like 3 or 4 rounds, but it was the same thing, right? It's and so he felt that he had the retcon because he lost, right? And it's that sort of player versus GM situation. So that's
at that point the person's pride is taking over there for sure.
Did you come back after that? It's just
we rarely played with that guy as a GM. Every so often, when every other GM was exhausted, it was like, okay, you get a shot, But it wasn't a thing that we did.
I mean, I
regular,
related to this somewhat is okay. So when we talk about storytelling versus gaming, good storytelling is to make things personal. Like it's a good idea to have the villain show up and be someone that the players can interact with. Like if you're going to have a set piece villain like that. That can be a lot of fun because they can talk to them, negotiate with them, learn about their point of view. Maybe the villain could offer them something. I like to have villains show up and try to bribe the players. Like, hey, I'll give you this big bag of gold if you just leave. And, it's like, you're just mercenary swords for hire, right? And if they,
I've done the tables. I know the damage you could cause. Here's all the gold that you could get instead.
I'm rich.
It's less than the damage.
Yeah, I mean, what was the point of being a rich villain if I'm willing to hire people to kill you? I could just give you the money.
Yeah.
But and then the players can get savvy and say, well, wait, if you had that much money, how much did you save with people to kill us? Well, you can ask them yourself. But moving on from there, the problem with this is made fun of in the movie The Gamers, and I'm sure this has happened before. If the villain shows up, the players will immediately draw all their weapons and attempt to murder them right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Because D&D, because the games have trained them for combat. This is related to the previous thing we talked about where I complained somewhat about your choices. I've seen also the modern D&D games where every time you kill the bad guys, they have a note on them that explains what the other bad guy is, because they want to have that. They want to have I want this bad guy to be personal so you can see how they talk and do, but I know if they were in the room, you would just murder them.
But also,
right,
you wanna,
it's like I was recently...
Sorry about that. You want to murder the villain because that's how you win. He's the villain. You defeat him. So why wait and talk to him? It's like right there within sword and spell reach. I mean, why? It's like, oh, I'm going to talk to you and you're going to pop up later. It happens in other video games where you have the cutscene where the cutscene immunity, where the villain comes in and it's like, oh, I'm going to talk to you. And it's like, but I have a rocket launcher. I could just,
And I can describe several reasons why you wouldn't want to do it. Because it would be illegal, because you haven't pinned any crimes on yet, because you have a sense of honor, because there are innocent people in the vicinity who might be killed, because you don't know the full extent of their plans, because if you killed them now, you wouldn't be able to figure out their plans or rescue the hostages. And everything I just mentioned does not matter to players because they'll just fucking kill him. Because they are so gung-ho on winning the fight. And that's why I was complaining about the fail forward can't fail thing earlier, because they also know that, speaking of your retcon problem, if they somehow killed the villain right now, the GM would somehow give them an out to still solve the rest of the adventure, because then it wouldn't be fun. But I'm also bringing this up because this is the kind of thing that a GM would retcon you for. They would say, okay, this is the kind of, he's not supposed to die yet, so I may not rewind everything that just happened, but I will blatantly cheat in front of you.
I will tell you how they managed to escape so that they can threaten you next time now.
I will let you hit them with a disintegrate that they technically failed the saving throw on, and then lie to you about how they somehow passed. Like, they will somehow do that, which is kind of a retcon. And like I said, we've got two problems here. First of all, your players don't understand drama. Like, that's the first problem we're running into. Because gaming has been nerfed down to Dungeons and Dragons mentality, the idea of the villain might show up and talk to you has been boiled out of the game as an experience. It's like, no, like you all said, well, of course you would kill them. It's a war game. We kill them as soon as we see them. We can't think of any reason, storytelling or dramatic wise or anything, to wait. And that's a problem of the game. That's also, to some extent, a problem of the players, because your players don't care about innocence, have no sense of honor, have no respect for the law or other codes, because your players are murder tourists.
Or you're in the dungeon in the depths of the earth where, there are no laws anyway, so what does it matter if you kill them all? Who's going to charge you?
I don't often have those problems because the most nice thing I'm going to say ever in this podcast, I don't have those problems because I don't play D&D. I don't play games where all those things are true, that we have no respect for law, authority, codes of honor, or personal morality, or innocence. I don't enjoy those kinds of games. I find, if I wanted that, I'd go fucking play World of Warcraft or go play a computer game where, the innocents would be immune to all damage and the bad guys would have cutscene immunity. By the way, I don't play games that have cutscene immunity. So it's like, I don't, I expect my players to respect that. And I also want to flip this around saying, by the way, I've also been writing games where you are actually rewarded for being in character.
Being in character, being in the universe, for caring about the things that you're actually responsible for, and not just diving straight into murder.
Yeah, because Griffin, you were in the Usagi Yojimbo, which is sadly not available. But Usagi Yojimbo had the idea that your combat prowess was directly tied to your story points.
Okay.
So your attack bonus was fixed to your story beats. So if this is beat 1, you are not as combat powerful as you would be in beat 3. So this was a way of telling the players in advance, you might not want to fight him now because you're going to be a lot more powerful at the end.
Right, and save up your beats and accept some failures so that you can be strong enough to fight them at the end as well.
Simply as a meta narrative, which was supposed to be one way to tell the players that. The other thing is that's one of the reasons why we actually came up with combat save, which made it into several of our games, which was the idea that everybody gets 1 out of death free. And so if you did decide to unload on the villain right here, right now, instead of getting information or details or anything out of him, literally, we told all of you in advance, there's something called combat save. We gave it to all you players, which is get out of 1 death free. We can also give it to villains. So you might be surprised that we're giving this to villains, but they could just leave. And so you wouldn't have to do a retcon. If the players did enough damage to kill the villain in 1 hit, they could tap a combat save and then flee. And they better have an escape route planned because they should have had one planned before encountering the players. Otherwise, this would be literally their last stand. So
I think that's also probably a good point to bring up in terms of retcon, where you as the person running the game go, wait a second, I didn't actually think about this. I now have to change the context of everything that's happening to allow this thing that I want to happen now.
It's usually
which is, of course, more of the cheating, yeah.
It's a huge problem. I mean, D&D 5th edition does have a minor solution to it, where they came up with the idea that a monster can pass their first 3 saving throws, no questions asked. And that, I think, I'm not sure if we inspired that. I don't know. Probably not. But that was a simple solution because that was a huge problem in D&D. Like, if you saw the bad guy, of course I'm going to unload the Disintegrate on him. That could kill him instantly. It has a small random chance of killing him instantly. Now, if you're playing D&D 5th edition, they pass their first 3 saves. You'd have to somehow unload 4 instant death things on them, and they would have to fail all of their saving throws before they could leave. So they have insurance against that in the modern game of just unloading. But in modern D&D, they don't do it anyway because they don't respect you enough to have you go into any encounter that... I mean, that was my bigger issue. D&D modern adventures don't respect the players enough to have them go into an encounter that might end differently than they expect. Therefore, they don't need retcons. And it's like, well, that's a solution, I guess.
Right, if everything is so easy that everyone will stomp over it and win the way that you expect it to happen, then, well, what's the problem then?
Well, and also, you can't kill the bad guy early because you're never going to meet the bad guy until the very end. That guarantees, we won't put anything in front of you that we expect we would have to retcon later. We don't do that.
Yeah. Although I think one way you can avoid all this is to have the bad guy, the players meet, they don't know it's a bad guy. Right?
Well, but that's working around it. Like, what I'm mentioning here is like, my issue here is not respecting. Our issue with retcons is they don't respect the players. The issue with retcons is by telling the players, okay, everything we just did is invalid. We need a do-over. Any investiture, like emotional, that you had in this is deleted. It didn't matter. We are willing to cheat and break the rules of the game. Like, literally break the rule. I don't think any game has retcons built into it. Probably probably your twee storytelling ones, but not this. Not the games we're talking about. We're literally willing to break the rules to do it. And I just think like that's an error of framing. It's kind of like saying like, we all agree that that's basically an error of storytelling. I'm just saying like, we're basically breaking the illusion that this could have gone differently. Because it went differently than we expected, we're actually going to rewind it until it goes the way we expected.
Right. What was the point of all the probability if we weren't accepting the probability that it would turn out poorly?
Yeah, but also earlier you mentioned about ripping the veil, and the ripping of the veil is like the player choices and actions and even the dice rolling don't matter. because the GM can just decide by fiat what's going to happen. Which is, well, again, we go to the point of why am I playing? Why did I even get into this encounter in the first place? If I go stabby at this guy and he just walks away.
Right, and retconning is the worst kind of fiat, because it's not just I'm deciding what is happening. It's I'm also going to decide that what did happen didn't happen. And because people used to complain about that. I remember, you can only see it on Mystery Science Theater these days, the Commando Cody and all of those, Republic sagas where, oh no, the car crashed and our bad guy died. Tune in next time. And then the next reel shows up and they show him jumping out of the car before it crashes, which is footage we didn't see last time, which is effectively a retcon. It was sure, just because you didn't show us that or whatever, you just made this up right now. That's not playing fair.
Right, and then that even comes into the exact same reason why you would do that in Tabletop RPG, because you want to keep using that character, and so you cheat and you get him back because you retcon it in.
I do know. I don't remember which superhero game had it, but it did. I think it was DC Heroes or even Marvel superheroes that suggested the mysterious death approach. I sort of built-in retcon. Yeah.
Retconning is when we take facts that were in evidence and delete them or change them. If the bad guy falls off a cliff, but we don't collect the body, then we don't know if they're really dead or not. So that's not a retcon that if we knock the guy off the cliff and we don't see the body, it's not a confirmed kill. So that's different if it's ambiguous instead of, what you see. But you can only do that once, because then you'll get crazy player characters who will insist on climbing down the cliff to go get the body.
Yeah.
And then they'll get angry when they don't find it.
Well, they've got to get the loot, right? The body had all the loot, so we got to go find it now.
I'm going gamer on me, too. What about the loot?
The body washed down the river? Well, we're going to go and steal the river barge here. We're going to go out into the ocean and start trolling.
I almost want to play a mid-level D&D game with Griffin just so he can yell at me, telling me, don't use Disintegrate, we'll lose all the loot. It's been forever since I've heard that.
But, that's also part of the reason I think you have retcons. It's like, oh, I created this villain to challenge the players, right? In order to do so, I load them up with magical items. It used to be more that way back in earlier editions. Now, you have
back when you could carry more than 2.
Yeah. Also, we have more. The creatures didn't necessarily have a lot of inherent powers and part of their, their abilities.
Yeah.
So, you didn't wave away the fact that a wizard, a spellcaster did just spellcast,
I'm in this room called my lair. It gives me really cool powers I don't have outside my lair for reasons I don't care to disclose.
Or I have spellcasting. It's like, but do you have a book? No, I just spellcast. I don't have a book or anything. It's just, that's what it is. But, it used to be that, hey, you have your amulets and your swords. Like, this guy has a lot of loot. Oh, they killed this guy. Which is, I expect him to kill this guy, but oh no, all the loot that he used to get all the bonuses and stand up to these people are now going to fall in the hands of the players.
Can't let them have a reward for overcoming adversity, can we?
Yeah.
That's why they went with lairs, because they didn't want you to get that stuff, because fuck you. But there's so many ways they do that. So, that's why I'm curious if retconning has been, because video games make me think that retconning might have been a bigger thing. And I have to wonder if there's people who are doing. I haven't seen retconning on what I've seen of stuff like Critical Role, Dimension 20. I've had complaints about stuff I've seen that seemed like bullshit asspulls to make the story go the way they wanted to, which is a different kind of issue. But
I think in earlier editions, they did have an early place. They did have a series of. They had a number of, and they had a special rule about bringing people back from the dead. And they even made an entire storyline about one of the characters having to sacrifice themselves so that they became the second hand to the goddess of death, so that everyone else will live.
I think they just shared that one to Rafferty about 3 or 4 times now.
But after that, they just they dialed down on even the possibility of death, right? It became more dramatic.
Right, they just removed it, which is always completely. It's like, oops, you might actually lose. We better make sure you can't actually lose. What were the dramatic stakes again? I mean, now you've broken that meta that I know that you can't lose. So, which is what the issue I'm always getting into. It's like, if your campaign is one where the players where it's not about the fear of loss, then I'm fine with most of these changes. If it's experiential or storytelling, in storytelling they don't call it retconning, they call it editing, or releasing a new edition. It's if your game was about that, fine. If you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, this isn't subtext, this is text. They're specifically like telling you, here's your character object, here is your hit point number. If this gets to 0, you're down. If this gets to too far negative, you're dead. And while there are tools of getting you back, a TPK is pretty much not going to do it. And so you could lose. And that's text. That's what's written in there. And we could ignore those rules. We can work around them. We can dance around them. But then there's so much in the game that's built around that it's kind of like, why did we show up today? It
right.
Like,
why are we following these rules if when we encounter them, we're going to retcon and ignore them anyway?
Right. Why did you invite me to play poker but with unlimited stakes?
And I think it's a difference between drama stemming from the actions of the players rather than let's make do this or script this in order for it to be dramatic. Like, oh, it happened randomly, you died. Oh, that's dramatic. Versus now it is time for you to die because we need the drama.
Well, now this is related to retconning, but it's a little different. So, have you ever run the same adventure but for a different group of players?
Yes.
Do you have any stories about that?
Okay, I have the story. I ran the one run that a lot was for 3rd edition. It was Green Roning's pirate theme township. I always played the first adventure, and normally it almost ended the same way, but the setup was different because originally they had to find information about a ship. And so there was always a situation that happened different. Like, for example, I literally intimidated one of the players by having an orc sitting down at a table with a giant axe propped against the table. And he kept insulting this player, but because he was a first level player, he didn't want to risk getting just that one hit that was just going to, lop his head off. So we had that drama. And then, but in other times, the players didn't go to that tavern. They went to like, oh, let's go to the chip registry. There's a person that keeps let's talk to that. So there were different ways, but at the end of the day, they still had to fight the same bad guys in the dungeon. So that wasn't that very different. But the setup was the thing that changed. How they got there was, dramatically different from one to the other. And I had a lot of fun doing that. But it's something Skullport, Ventures in Skullport or something like that. Yeah, I don't.
That's close enough.
Yeah, I don't remember the title. That's how Green Running really took off with that adventure in 3rd edition. They became very popular there. Yeah, so there's that. So yeah, I played a couple of times. Had I had a total TPK that negated? No, I haven't had that experience. But yeah, close enough.
Yeah, what kind of follow-up do you have on that, Raf?
Oh, I was going to ask you, Griffin. Well, I mean...
I could give you one too, but...
Well, I've been running games for, decades now. And so there's a couple adventures that I've run multiple times. And especially like the Ironclaw demo adventure, obviously, the Closing the City Gates. I've been running that showed up in a version for the 1st edition Ironclaw. And we've kept it around for a long time. It's one of my favorite demo adventures. And so I've seen a variety of different approaches to it. And it's not so much a retcon as because I've been running the same adventure over 25 years, I've seen the tastes of gaming and the expectations of random groups have changed over time. Because I've seen gaming go from very vicious and bloody, and the battle chess I think people are complaining about, to a lot more like exotic and enjoyable builds. Like I always love seeing the characters that people. And one of the crazy things about running Ironclaw is, people can be extremely diverse in what they make. The species and career combinations, there's dozens of them. There's thousands of combos. And so I run into groups that are less combat oriented or also just don't have the patience for it. Like it's, and patience isn't the right word. That's not what they came for. They didn't come for a big fight. So not only do they not want to do a big, long, drag-out fight, but they didn't build a character for it either. And so the original setup has a lot of bad guys in it because I was expecting a party of 6 bloodthirsty murder tourists. But now when I run it for a group of 4 adventurers, it's a lot more difficult the way it's written. And I also think it's written in the text not as generous. Like, I think it's written... I'm proud of the adventurer, but now the more I've seen. So I've been retconning that, but with different groups. Like, I've been slowly modifying the text and changing it. Plus, also, I'm good at improv. I think one of the we talked about reading the room. So I think one of the a retcon is in some ways a failure to read what's going on, because if you had to rewind everything the way it played out, you somehow had to act against the choices and the die rolls that the players made. If you were reading the room and improving to roll with it, I mean, this is why I asked the original question of, like, what's supposed to happen? If something happened in the experience that was different than what you expected, that should be an outcome of die rolls and player choices. That should be an outcome of what happened here. And so we should be rolling with that, because in theory, anything the players did with die rolls and player choices was the right thing. Now, I heard a new thing here of, what if we were doing the rules wrong? And that really gets into the big existential question I've been complaining about, which is, if no one noticed right now, are you doing the rules wrong? Because I can't watch streamed games. They drive me nuts because they are often doing the rules wrong. And people will tell me, well, that's just their house rules, or that's just the way they're doing it, so they're improving. Really? I mean, like, your whole question of, we have to retcon everything because we did the rules wrong. I'm watching these streams and people are in the comments all the time. They could be telling these guys how they're doing the rules wrong, but apparently they're all having a good time and they just roll with it. So, what made that retcon necessary?
Right. And you mentioned, like, retconning the adventure because of, like, your changed own expectations. And I think if I have to go ahead and mention one that I've run multiple times, it would be the Into the Drakkwald adventure, which comes out of the 2nd edition Warhammer book. It's in the back, and it's just supposed to introduce you to the world. You start in a small town. The town is going to be attacked, so everyone goes, let's just leave and go to the big city where it's defensible. It's as simple as possible. All you have to do is go down the road. It's fairly scripted. Not a whole lot is supposed to happen, but the most interesting thing to happen is that the old nice grandmother who's with you is also a witch and is planning to go ahead and get her revenge, because on her way up to the north she sees, oh right, this is where my house burned down. I've actually been really mad about that for years. I'll go deal with it now. So when I end up running it the first time, the players ended up talking down Granny to the point that she fell asleep because she was so bored with what they were saying. Fantastic character moment. The second time around, I'm like, wow, I really want to give my players this experience of having this character come back, interact with them some, and do some other things. So I ended up retconning how she would present herself, or what information I would give to the players, or how dangerous things really were, or how irredeemable people who use random bits of chaos are.
Right, and I kind of want to start. We're abusing the meaning of the word retcon here. Like, that's why
that is true.
A little bit. It's retroactive continuity is when we change something that we already agreed happened. We've edited the story, so we're going to keep moving forward linearly, but we've changed, or we're replaying something that happened. Instead, what we're talking about is good storytelling. It's where, okay, this is what the script says to happen. How do I roll with that and make that personal to my players, up to and including diverging from the story? And that's why I asked, like, this whole thing of playing the same adventure with multiple groups can give you some perspective as a game host of how a story could play out differently with different people.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Yeah, in fact, I just want to do a quick aside here. Griffin, were you in when I ran Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay? I ran Shadows over Bugenhaven. Were you in that game?
I don't think I was. I think you were going to be in the first time I ran Warhammer 2nd Edition, but you stopped showing up.
I had problems.
I know, that's understandable.
at the time.
But that would be the only time we played that game together.
Because we streamed it, and I remember, like, speaking of things that aren't supposed to happen, what makes Second Edition is one of my favorite games, and what makes demons and chaos monsters so scary is they have a fear effect.
Mhm.
So when you see them, you have to pass a willpower test, and if you fail, you're not allowed to do anything.
Yep.
Which, like, totally nerfs you. And for the most part, Warhammer is a deadly game, and the thing that makes the chaos monster scary is they have fear. So
Right.
we had spoilers for this for Shadows over Bugenhaven. There was the encounter where they go to the sewers and break in. The players had gotten 4 henchmen. They had recruited 4 henchmen because they had proper skills and money and resources, and they were friends. So we have 4 players and 4 able-bodied fighters. And they show up where the evil demon is, and they confront the evil demon. He's right there. Immediately, everyone has to make fear tests. We have 8 heroes. 7 of them pass their fear tests.
Hey, yeah.
Which, I might add, is pretty unusual. All of these are less than 50-50. So
Yeah.
7 of them pass. They beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Because they're just like, there's cultists there who aren't much of a threat, and there's the demon who is a threat. But they just destroyed him. And that's one of those things that you might be tempted to retcon, but I just thought that was so hilarious.
No, that's awesome because you can see the demon going like, oh,
I thought what was
didn't
going to happen
work.
was they were going to bring the henchmen in there. They were all going to scream and be useless. And instead, all of the henchmen passed their tests. So they just beat the crap out of them.
Now, you see, that's always my favorite because that's the anti-climax. Because the climax of it is supposed to be the demon shows up, he's really scary, and everyone runs away. The anti-climax is nobody's afraid, they beat his ass, and they go, wait, why were we so afraid?
I'm almost tempted if we should. I don't know if we can do a whole show on anti-climax, but that's what I've talked about before. The anti-climax, the paradox of anti-climax. If your players have the right skills, do the right plan, and make the right rolls, then you have anti-climax because they'll just show up and win, and it will look so breezy and effortless that they don't look like they were challenged. But on the other hand, if the players have the right build, the right plan, and make the right rolls, they should succeed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, we'd have to ask ourselves what we can change about that. But I've been in games where players get angry. It's like, that was just too easy. What do you mean too easy? You're rolling good.
The thing is, like, the good part of the anticlimax is, of course, that because it was so effortless and easy, you look cool doing it. And that's why it's fun.
I've met players or even GMs who get angry.
Who don't
about
like
that.
being cool.
Yeah.
I understand. We're
Yeah.
nerds.
Well, it's like, it didn't. It's that weird thing where it didn't take long enough, therefore it must not have been challenging. Which, like I said, it's a weird question. It's like saying I think that's why we're having the battle chess problem, because a battle's supposed to be challenging, therefore it should take a long time. Because you can't kill all the player characters. We already discussed you're not allowed to do TPK. The players won't enjoy that. So what is the purpose of the battle? Well, if we make it shorter, I mean, I guess we could get through more of them, which I guess would be a good thing. But it's something we have to start examining of why we're doing all of this.
Yeah, what is the fun part of the game for everyone? So let's go ahead and hit up some final words about retconning then. What's fun about retconning? Lessons.
What is fun?
Well, you can answer a different question. I'm just trying to prompt something.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun if you can keep the K-pop, right? If you can keep the illusion going, and you're doing it mostly pro player, right? You're not doing it because your ego as a GM is wounded and the fight was too short or whatever. We're like, okay, this what needs to happen, right? Then, or you feel because you read the room that it's what needs to happen when it's you and your players. Remember, you're a player in the table as well. Then I think that can be positive, but it's one of those things. It's like, be very, very careful with this, how much salt you put in the recipe. If the temptation is to, if it works once, you're gonna try to keep doing it again and again and again until you actually gonna get caught and go like, oh well, and it just it just becomes anti-player.
Right. Rafferty, what do you got to wrap up with?
I guess a positive phrase would be good things make things good, which is, well, in other words, like we all agree that if you're a spiteful GM who retcons things because you want them to go a certain way, your player's going to hate you because not only did you change everything to make it go, it's one thing to change everything and make it go the way you wanted, making them do the battle chess all over again. Ugh. So, I mean, like, I'm under the belief that you never have to do a retcon. I could understand if you had an entire group of people who, if they got TPK'd or all lost, but still wanted to continue the campaign, that maybe all of you would concede that we could just rebuild characters and just do all this all over again. But we've been taking the perspective that part of the gaming is the emergent experience. It's, we don't know what's going to happen. And in fact, things could happen that we don't like. I mean, that's one thing we have to have buy into. Not everyone buys into that. Not everyone plays a role-playing game for that. Things happen that we don't like, up to and including a fatality, an end to things where our character object is no longer in play. I mean, Wander Home is a game that actually has that as a mechanic that people won't, people have been lauding. So I mean, I guess if you had the kind of game where retcons were expected, that could be good. But I think we're all in agreement here that essential to the experience is the idea that things might happen that I'm okay with, but I wouldn't have consciously chosen. It's what I called ice cream for dinner, where, if you ask players what they want, they'll say ice cream for dinner. They don't actually want that, but that's what they'll ask for. So that's what, you got to give them sometimes the vegetables or the things they don't like, because that's supposed to make the other experiences richer. It's supposed to be, it's not a gamble unless you could actually lose. I like that poker with infinite stake. I came up with that. So, if that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. So if we're expecting things, if we're expecting things could go bad or go south, we have to roll with that. And a good game host, so that's why we put in our books the art of improv. Be fair, build up, and have fun.
There you go. Great note to end it off on, and that's where we're going to end it for this episode, Notes from the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games at the same channel on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com. Join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Quarrels Ironclaw expansion book. And of course, with Lessons Learned, go ahead and check out his channel on Twitch at Lessons Learned 1. And of course, check out all of his wonderful books over on Amazon as well. For right now, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all again. Until next time, everyone.